So that's just speculation. There's no specific mention of any purpose for why Massasoit and Usa Mequin, why would Usa Mequin come visit us? He wasn't invited. And then when Massasoit, Usa Mequin, and all the Wampanoags / Pokanoquets eventually came, there wasn't enough food. They had to go out and get more food, 5 white-tailed deer, so the pilgrims weren't ready for them. They weren't invited when they got there. It was kind of a spontaneous party. Pilgrims are partying, having a fall harvest festival, shoot some guns. Then the Wampanoags come over, and they're like, hey, guys, what's going on? They're like, oh, you're not going to kill us? No, we're not going to kill you. We just wanted to know what was going on. Oh, well, we're just having a fall festival. Oh, okay. Well, we like fall festivals. We're going to stay. And they're like, oh, okay, great. I guess you could go ahead and stay. That's what happened. And then while they were there, they signed a political military alliance saying that if one or the other was attacked, then they would defend each other. And they gave Miles Standish, Bradford, John Carver the permission to stay on the Patuxent lands. So it was an agreement in order to hold on to the land that they just, adversely possessed. This celebration of peace and friendship agreement was made between the Wampanoag, Pokanoquet, Sachem, Massasoit, and Miles Standish, giving the pilgrims a clearing in the forest where the old Patuxent village had been in order to build their new town of Plymouth, that being the main and only purpose for the 3-day event of entertaining and feasting. So they're there, get used to it, right? That's what the pilgrims are saying. We're here, we're queer, and get used to it. And the Wampanoags are like, all right, you can keep this land right here, but that's it. And because we give you this land, if Native Americans attack us, the Wet'suwet'en or some of the other Native Americans that were not friendly to the Wampanoags, they became military allies. So we'll let you have this land, but if we get attacked, you got to come and help us protect ourselves, and if you get attacked, we'll do the same. So it was a military alliance, and it was a land deal. They actually got permission to be on the land at Thanksgiving Day. The first so-called Thanksgiving was when they got permission to stay on the land. So, and an encounter of this sort never happened again. They never had a 3-day festival the next year and the year after. It never happened. There were no prayers. There was no giving of thanks at the supposed happy harvest. The only food item we know is a 5 white-tailed deer. We also know that Edward Winslow doesn't mention a prayer, a day of Thanksgiving, a declaration of Thanksgiving, or anything like that. It could have been, it couldn't have been at Thanksgiving because, it's a Christian holiday of fasting and prayer. Let's give a day of thanks. There was, dancing, singing, merrymaking, entertaining, feasting. There was also a bunch of pagan, heathen, non-Christians, right? So all of this is frowned upon by prudish, fundamentalist zealots. This day of Thanksgiving is a time to pray and reflect and fast. Feast is the opposite of fast. So, being that they're Christians, you would think that they would mention, oh, by the way, this was a day of Thanksgiving. But they didn't mention it because it wasn't a day of Thanksgiving at all. At the very least, it was just a fall festival that spontaneously combined, where the pilgrims were celebrating a cornucopia of food, and the Pokanoquet and the Wampanoag came and crashed their little party. At the very most, it could have been a possible military battle that the pilgrims eventually smoothed over. But most likely, the 3-day festival of entertainment and feasting was the very meeting that united the Pokanoquet, Wampanoag, and the Pilgrims in a political and military alliance against the other Native Americans around Squanto's Patuxent lands. So all the extra fluff surrounding Thanksgiving is just made up in the later years, most likely by Sarah Josepha Hale, who lobbied President Lincoln to declare Thanksgiving a holiday in 1863 in the middle of the Civil War in order to get the North and South feeling the common sense of American unity. Bradford mentioned the different food items they collected: cod, bass, wild turkeys, fowl, waterfowl, venison, Indian corn. Waterfowl is most likely geese or duck, but fowl could be any bird. They could be bluebirds, cardinals, owls, bald eagles, maybe even the now extinct passenger pigeon. Oh, the passenger pigeon. We ate a bunch of passenger pigeons at the first supposed Thanksgiving. The Pilgrims didn't have any ovens. The forks and table knives was invented that year in France. So they didn't have any of these food utensils. They didn't have ovens. So there couldn't have been any of baking of pies. There weren't sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, honey-baked hams. There was no flour or butter for pies or oven, so no pumpkin pies, nor was there any cranberry sauce or corn on the cob. Since Indian corn is used to make hominy, there wasn't any apples, no pears. They may have had pumpkins, because pumpkins is native to America, but not a pie, just pumpkins. And they may have also eaten eels and shellfish, such as lobster. Lobster, that's a good Thanksgiving. Why can't we all eat lobster? Clams, mussels. They could have also had succotash, Indian corn, eel, cod, bass. So the mythical so-called first Thanksgiving wasn't ever repeated because it wasn't a tradition, nor was it intended to be. How Massasoit actually saved William Bradford's, his ass, since half the colony had died in the very beginning. William Bradford should have sucked Massasoit's dick, or Massasoit should have made William be his little cabana butt boy for years, just for helping him to survive after that first horrid year. Massasoit even gave them Squanto so they could learn how to raise their crops and be able to better survive. But really, Massasoit shouldn't have had any pity for Bradford, just like these goddamn Republicans who don't have any empathy for the Syrian refugees. Just like last year, with the immigration debate, or the Guatemalan kids who needed refuge. They didn't give a shit. Syrian refugees, little girls, orphans, widows, they need a place to stay. Fuck them, right? They're going to come over here, take over our way of life. Hardly likely, right? They have to go through a very hard vetting process. And then did you see the Greece Coast Guard who tried to puncture that hole in the Syrian floating device with the large sharp pole? There's like 50 Syrians in this, flotation device, and the Greek Coast Guard is sitting there trying to jab a hole into it and then drives away. And Turkey, the Turkish Coast Guard, were the ones who saved them. So after the rigorous screening process that the Syrians would have to go through in order to get into this country, it's virtually impossible for any of the terrorists to get here. If anything, perhaps the reason why these racist Republican teabaggers are skeptical of the Syrian refugees is because they know deep down inside that's who they actually are. That's who they are. They're secret Trojan horse terrorists who come to a land that wasn't theirs with the intention of taking it all over away from the natives. Same thing with the word nigger. White people are the ones that came up with the word nigger, but who's the real nigger? Nigger's supposed to be like what? The barbaric, animal, rapist, whatever. Well, where'd that image actually come from? It came out of the mind of the white man. The white man projected all his negative qualities on black people. So niggers are the white supremacists. So these racist Republican teabagging niggers know that that's how they were. They came over as pilgrims, said, this is our culture, we're speaking English, we're Christians, we're not going to translate to your religion, we're not going to speak your language, fuck your way of life, fuck your culture, we're going to keep, basically a diaspora, our own sort of, English town. They started in English town, where they were going to retain their own culture and customs that they brought from the old world. That's why they're skeptical of them, because that's who they are. They're projecting their own bullshit on the Syrian refugees. In 1623, a day of fasting and prayer during a period of drought was changed to one of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was issued many times, before the Pilgrims, after the Pilgrims, like a dozen times by the revolutionaries, the American revolutionaries. But 1623 is 2 years later. So what happens? Well, Miles Standish, there's a horrific spasm of bloodshed. The West Augusta Indians, March 1623, 7 colonists die, 7 Massachusetts sachems, the chiefs. So Massachusetts, West Augusta, they decapitated Wittawamut, the leader. So when we think about this great happy meal, we assume it's Native Americans and Pilgrims, but it was the Wampanoags specifically. For the Massachusetts and the Wessagusset, it was nothing but bloodshed. And Wittawamit, after they decapitated him, Miles Standish parades him on a pike and goes to Plymouth Colony and puts it in the middle and on top of the tallest building so that everybody sees it and so that it will be a terror unto the countryside. So that's sort of the relationship between Native Americans and English, and I think that this holiday is good because we think about that relationship. With the Wampanoags in 1621, it seemed like an uneasy alliance, but an alliance nonetheless. And then, eventually you'll see that the English, during the Mystic Massacre, they just torment all the surrounding tribes. They keep encroaching settlers, kind of like the Israelis keep on settling into Palestinian territory, just keep taking an inch. And, during the Pequot War, the Mystic Massacre, the English burned entire villages to the ground, while Native American men, women, old people, none of the warriors, but women, children, were sleeping. They were sleeping, and so they killed them all. This is what the English did. And then 1676, to end off how the Wampanoags and the Pilgrims had actually interacted, as more and more English settlers arrived in the following years, this peace gradually deteriorated. You had the death of William Bradford, you had the death of Massasoit, then, there was Connecticut colony, whatever. Within 54 years, the English and the Wampanoag were fighting each other to the death in King Philip's War. You had Metacomet. Metacomet was trying to get Native Americans to attack the white people, all the colonists, not just Plymouth or Massachusetts Bay Colony, but they, the English kept on taking more than their fair share. So really, both of them, I guess you could say, were at fault. But the Massasoit people, the original person who came and brought 5 white-tailed deer for this big feast, the one who gave the Pilgrims their Patuxent land, let them stay on the Patuxent lands, the ones who had agreed to a military and political alliance with the original Pilgrims, with Bradford and Carver. Those people were wiped out within 54 years. Massasoit's people, the Wampanoag, Pokanoket, were nearly wiped out. It was a war against the Wampanoags. It was Metacomet's war. They called him King Philip, but his name was Metacomet. And just like Wittawamit's head was put on a pike, they put Metacomet's head on a pike too. Metacomet's head was put on a pike. They ripped him limb to limb, quartered him, threw his bodies up in the trees. The guy who shot him got his right hand, so they just totally fucked up his dead body, Metacomet's dead body, and then put his head on a pike and put his head in the middle of the colony for, decades, for about 20 years. That's the end story of the Wampanoags. What happened to Chief Massasoit and the Squantos people and all those people that had brought all, the 5 white-tailed deer with this big, nice, happy Thanksgiving dinner, they were exterminated. They were wiped out. So to celebrate Thanksgiving would be to be like celebrating slavery in America. Let's celebrate, instead of Thanksgiving and Native Americans, let's just say, hey, remember that one time when that one slave had brought some deer for Massa, and Massa was happy? We can point out one good thing between the relationship of the slaves and the slave masters and say that, heck, the whole thing of slavery was completely good. Just whitewash the entire history of slavery by pointing out one time when the slave was extra good with the Massa, and then while they're sharing bread, they're staring at a sunset. So they shared a moment. Oh, Massa, master and slave, oppressor, oppressed, was able to share this piece of bread together and stare at a sunset. If that's the celebration, you're ignoring the entire fucking history of slavery, and that's what Thanksgiving is. Thanksgiving is a moment in time when there was a tiny glimmer of camaraderie between Wampanoag people and the Pilgrims, and then the rest of the time it was bloodshed, genocide, rape, disease, extermination, genocide. So we don't need to whitewash history. We need to think about the entire history. I think we should keep the food We need to keep the food. We need to keep the Native American and white people relationship so we can think about it. It should be more of a day of mourning or maybe a celebration of all things Native American. And keep the food. The family thing, I think we need to check the family thing out because it was a multicultural thing. It wasn't just about us getting into our individual tribes. It was about the whole community getting together. All the Wampanoags, all of the pilgrims, not just their family, but the whole fucking community. So I think it should be a more multicultural community event. Families are good. Families can come to the thing, but just everybody separating into the little individual tribes, we're too tribalistic as it is right now. So there's some things in that event we can keep, but, keep the good and chuck the bad. That's my take on it. Jonathan Masters, happy Thxgvn Day, everybody. 2/23, Thanksgiving Day, 11/26, 2015. Grundy, Virginia. Peace out.